The anti-Trump media went into emergency mode because Iran, on Wednesday, May 27, 2026, appeared to be trying to turn a diplomatic surrender into domestic propaganda. After coming under American pressure to negotiate the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, commercial traffic, and a broader agreement with Washington. While the left tries to sell the idea that Trump didn't gain that much, the truth is more uncomfortable for them. Tehran is not announcing strength, it's trying to save face. The regime is now discussing terms, deadlines, mediation, and oversight. Trump made the regime feel the cost and forced the Ayatollahs to enter the game they claim to control, which Iran tried to hide. Why did the left panic? How did Trump turn the tables and make the regime back down after weeks of saying they would never back down? I'll tell you all about it in a moment. If you like this kind of digital content, straightforward and to the point, consider subscribing because here we have videos like this every day. The pressure started at the most sensitive point for Tehran, the difference between making a threat and actually backing up that threat. Iranian state television released a version of a preliminary memorandum saying that Iran would restore commercial traffic in the strait to previous levels within a month, while the United States would withdraw forces from the region and lift the naval blockade. But the very way this information came out already shows the problem. It didn't come as a clear military victory. It came as a draft, as a narrative test, as an attempt to sell a less humiliating outcome to the Iranian public. The White House denied the Iranian version and called the report fabricated. This reaction shows that Trump did not accept being put into Tehran's script. The regime tried to rush to the state media and publish its own terms before Washington could control the political interpretation of the agreement. That's where the left clings to the noise and tries to turn the negotiation into an American defeat. But what's behind that curtain is something else. Iran is only talking about withdrawal, blockade, transit, and mediation because the pressure worked. Those who are comfortable don't need to leak drafts. Those who are winning don't need to rush to explain their own retreat. Trump also made it clear that he would not accept Iran or Oman controlling the Strait of Hormuz as if the passage were the private property of a hostile regime. At the cabinet meeting in Washington, he accused Tehran of trying to push the negotiations until the midterm elections as if the regime could wait for a political change in the United States to seek better terms. The interpretation is simple. Iran is trying to buy time, not because it is strong, but because it knows that Trump does not negotiate like a weak Democrat. Tehran wants time. Trump wants guarantees. Tehran wants a narrative. Trump wants a verification mechanism. Iranian surrender becomes evident when the regime that used to shout about resistance starts discussing how to reopen the passage, how to normalize trade, how to avoid another blow. The very debate about a 60-day deadline to consolidate the agreement shows that Iran is looking for an institutional way out, so it doesn't have to admit it was forced to give in. The left wants to call this Trump's failure. For anyone looking at it soberly, it's a calculated retreat by Tehran in the face of pressure that became too costly. The American operation against Iran had already been presented by the White House as part of the policy of peace through strength. Washington said the objectives were to destroy the regime's military capabilities, prevent nuclear advancement, cut support to terrorist groups, and pave the way for a ceasefire with the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. The left ignores this detail because it dismantles the collapse narrative. Trump didn't get into this crisis to please TV commentators. He laid out the cost and forced the opponent to choose between continuing to take political hits or negotiating. The left's panic shows up because they need to sell the image of Trump as out of control exactly at the moment when Iran is trying to get out of the crisis with an agreement. That's why they attack posts, memes, phrases, provocations, and any detail of the messaging. The strategy is to take the focus off the central fact. While they shout about style, the Iranian regime discusses terms. While they talk about an outburst, Tehran talks about maritime transit. While they pretend that Trump failed, the Ayatollahs try to explain to their own people why they are negotiating with the same president they claim to face head-on. The case of Canada also got pulled into this narrative fight in a distorted way. The Canadian government has started negotiations to purchase Saab's Global Eye system as a new airborne early warning and control capability. The left tried to sell this as proof of the United States' isolation, but this interpretation ignores a change that Trump has been demanding for years. Allies need to spend more, produce more, and take on part of their own defense. The Canadian announcement says that the Global Eye will help Canada's armed forces detect and deter threats in the Arctic and beyond. It also mentions supporting 3,000 jobs in the aerospace and defense sector. Saab reported that Canada has entered into formal negotiations, but there is still no signed contract or purchase order. In other words, even at this point, the left tries to turn an industrial defense negotiation into an alleged burial of American leadership. In fact, allies are reorganizing because they understand that the world has become tougher, and this directly aligns with Trump's vision. Defense can't just be pretty talk. It needs to become real capability. The economy is part of this same dispute. Republican leaders are already saying that the midterm election will be decided by people's wallets, by investments, and by the perception of improvement in the United States. The left tries to avoid this because they need the public to see chaos before they feel the results. If investments show up, if allies take action, if opponents negotiate, and if the White House keeps up the pressure, the narrative of miserable failure loses strength. That's why they lump everything together. Iran, Canada, Texas, social media posts, UFC, global health, and any other available topic. The goal is to create a sense of disorder, even when the facts show strategic movement. Iran knows this kind of game very well. Since the Islamic Revolution, Tehran has used internal propaganda to turn retreat into resistance. During the American hostage crisis between 1979 and 1981, 52 Americans were held captive for 444 days until they were released. On January 20th, 1981, the day of Ronald Reagan's inauguration. That episode marked American politics because it showed how hostile regimes gauge weakness and strength in Washington. When they sense hesitation, they push the limits. When they sense real cost, they look for a way out. Today, the logic repeats itself in another form. Tehran tries to negotiate without appearing to have given in. Other nations also teach this lesson. Israel responds to existential threats without asking permission from the international press. India strengthens its position when it senses risk on its own routes and borders. Poland increased its military weight within Europe because it understood that security cannot be outsourced to bureaucratic rhetoric. Canada is now seeking more capability in the Arctic for the same reason. The left wanted a story about Trump collapsing. They got a story of Iran surrendering in negotiations, allies arming themselves, and the media trying to hide the obvious. The Iranian regime did not come out of this crisis freer. They ended up having to explain why they accept discussing terms under American pressure. And Trump once again showed that sometimes the hardest part of war is not firing the shot. It's forcing the enemy to sit at the table after spending weeks saying they would never give in. I'm Milson Alves, Global. And my purpose? It's to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community.